Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how leniently climate activists are treated by the Western legal system. Now, there's no doubt that BLM, Antifa, climate activists are really globalist foot soldiers to foster and create race, gender, and climate division in society, in Western society. So they're looked after and funded by the globalist machine, and they again, they're the foot soldiers that are trying to bring Western society down to its knees, and there's barely a voice opposing them. But I just want to sort of highlight a few things. You may have noticed in the Antifa BLM riots in the United States, and indeed elsewhere around the world, in England and even some here in Australia, um, the incredible leniency that if the police arrested them at all, which was in itself a rarity, then it was rarer still that any court would convict them or give them anything more than a slap on the wrist. Now, a few that went really overboard, they got dealt with probably a little bit more harshly, but again, very rare. Uh, Now, contrast that with how, for example, people who opposed the COVID lockdowns, people who were losing their businesses and their houses, and they had a genuine grievance. And they were saying, well, there's no science in here. You're asserting that it's a problem and we have to get vaccinated and so on, but can we have some proof? Can we have some medical trials? This sort of thing. And so genuine questions, and whether they're right or not, I don't buy into that side of it, but genuine questions nonetheless. And how harshly they were treated. So they turn up for a protest, a legitimate protest, one that's approved, and yet those people are getting 6 months in the slammer, or January 6th, you walk into the building and take a few photos, walk out again. Next thing you know, you've got an FBI raid and you're in prison. So now contrast this with the way that the climate activists are treated. Now, some of these climate activists, they're absolutely creating havoc. Blocking peak hour traffic, and they're usually silly little girls and deluded people, generally screaming leftists, just low IQ, low rent people. And these are the people, of course, that the NGOs want, and these are the people that the NGOs try and recruit. Because they're very susceptible to simplistic, silly little messages. And again, if you want to destroy any society, go for the women first. They'll help you destroy a society much quicker than people who have to be responsible for their actions might behave. So I just want to look at. I just was going through and digging through the online archives. And only going back about 12 months, or a little bit longer, I think it was, but 14 months, but looking at all the climate change activist court cases that I could find. Given the amount of climate change activism and street level activism and things like that, you'd think there'd be a lot of cases going to court, but it's clear that the police are really just moving them on, and more importantly, if the police do detain them, the Department of Prosecutions, which is infiltrated with globalists, typically isn't pressing charges. You want to misgender somebody transitioning, then holy fuck, you're in deep shit, buddy. But if you want to turn the downtown area of a big city into absolute havoc and chaos for 3 or 4 hours by your climate change activism without a permit and all this sort of stuff, then you're probably not going to get in trouble. If again, the police will only arrest you rarely, and if they do arrest you, the Department of Prosecutions is unlikely to go forward with it. If the department does go forward with it, then the court is unlikely to convict you. So your chances of getting done are incredibly slim. I couldn't find a single case in Australia, and there have been plenty of a single case in Australia where, unless there was direct criminal damage, and even then the sentences were remarkably light. I couldn't find a single case of where a climate change activist was actually convicted, even though people have been arrested multiple times for the same thing. They were just, in some cases, the judges are saying, "Oh, you're doing a wonderful job bringing this climate stuff to the attention of the populace. I'm not going to charge you. Off you go." And they can be back in court the next day almost. But there's a few cases I just want to zero in on here, just to give you an idea of how well protected and how well funded these climate activists are, and thus how irresponsible they're allowed to be. Now, here's a case here, and you just have to sort of appreciate the extent of the corruption of our legal system across the Western world. It doesn't have to be here or anywhere in particular; it could be anywhere. Just how well protected these silly little people are. Here's somebody who got arrested. Again, a silly little girl, no idea what she's doing, completely caught up in the ideology of it all. Never had a job in her life. Does some part-time course in lesbian studies or something, so here's a number of things, and again, how differently a straight white male who's protesting the lockdowns, how differently they're treated. So this little girl comes from a young girl comes from a rural area, and she. But she travels several hundred miles to come to a big city to do the activism. So you've got premeditated. You've got you tick all the boxes here for someone that set out to create all sorts of trouble. She says she's doing something wonderful for the planet, because even though the entire education establishment, the entire media establishment, nearly all the political establishment, all the public service, United Nations, pretty much everywhere you turn, everyone's screaming about climate and so on. But she insists that she has to let people know that there's a climate issue. Because even though everybody's talking about it, everyone's on side with it, she has to go out and do something. The simple little idiot. But anyway, so she does this, gets arrested, but here's the interesting thing. Now the court case, instead of being held where the crime, the alleged crime's taken place, they don't do that, and usually they would, and that creates a fairly high cost and a lot of inconvenience for the person who's been charged with the crime. But instead, they transfer the hearing of the case to a regional town close to where she lives. Now, on top of that, a very activist lawyer who comes from a city that's nearly 2,000 miles away, somehow takes up the case. He's a very activist guy, lots of credentials in the area of climate activism and leftist activism generally. So he takes up the case, from what I can gather, pro bono. Who's paying him? Even his travelling and accommodation costs, this sort of thing, would come to a decent amount of money. He's not a guy incapable of earning an income, but somehow he's doing this. Who's paying for all that? That isn't disclosed. I think it would be a factor. If I was a judge hearing the case, I'd go, well, who's paying for all this? Gee whiz, how are you affording this high-class lawyer? This lawyer don't come cheap. This guy's like $500-600 an hour, and yet you, a penniless sort of student, can somehow afford top-drawer legal representation. I mean, wow. So she gets that. So that's two big breaks for her. Then on top of that, a renowned activist judge who coincidentally happens to be Jewish, an activist judge gets given the case. Now, of all the judges that could have heard the case, they managed to pick the most activist, the most pro-climate change activist judge or junior judge. Now, isn't that incredible? So let's just line this up. She manages to get the case transferred to somewhere close by, so it's really convenient for her, really convenient for her. They don't usually do that for people that get charged. I mean, sometimes they do, but they don't usually do that. If it was a straight white male, they'd have made him travel and undergo all sorts of difficulty and inconvenience just to teach him a lesson for being a bad guy. But instead they transfer it. Then she gets free legal aid, not from some cheap, shitty legal aid lawyer that's hanging out in the local office there, but a nationally renowned lawyer of quite a high profile. Somehow she gets that free of charge. Wow, I mean that's incredible. Then on top of that, she gets an activist judge who's very sympathetic, but the most sympathetic judge that you could possibly find to the climate change cause. And wow, how does she do it? Now, clearly, this is not possible. Some high-profile lawyer wouldn't be taking the case unless they are being paid or rewarded somehow by the globalist NGO machine. So, that's there. The prosecution department wouldn't transfer a case, not for something like this. That's bullshit. So she's being looked after there. And again, it's not the way the legal system works, by the way, or the court system works is unless it's a judge with specific expertise. Say there's an expertise in business contract law or something like that, then they may give it to judges who have expertise in complex legal matters or contractual legal matters. But other than that, every case, as it comes off the production line, is given to the next judge. Whichever judge is available, it goes to them. But in ideological cases, of course, that isn't what happens. Instead, they give it to someone. Okay, this is the outcome we want. So we want a case. We want this case. We want this girl to be let off, without any charges or without any fines or without anything at all. So to get that ideological outcome, we're going to give this case to the most ideological judge who will, we know, make the decision we want him to make, which is exactly what happened. So this activist got no penalty at all. There's no, as I understand it, there's no recorded charge. There's no fine. There's nothing. She, like many other activists, by the way, and certainly in Australia and elsewhere, is free to go back out onto the street and do the same thing again straight away. There's no recorded charge. So if the matter goes to court next time, they can't say, well, you've already got a charge. You're on a good behaviour bond. It's prison for you, girlie. No. Able to do it again. So we can see the level of protection that's in place by the globalist machine, the activist NGO globalism, the level of protections in place, and its tentacles go right into the very heart of the legal system. I will allege, into the very heart of the legal system, and a legal system that now dispenses ideological outcomes as are demanded and required by the globalist machine. But if you're a straight white male stepping out of line, no breaks for you, buddy. You've been with Tasseless today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.